So it's a great question. I want to answer that by just looking at 3 reasons why what has happened and 3 reasons about what is going to happen, all right? So first of all, the 3 things that has happened. First of all, you'll be aware that property property goes up in cycles like this. It's not one straight line. And so the important time to buy is, of course, in this time here where the market is flat or going slightly backwards. Now, what we've experienced over the last 6 years is a period of time like probably never before in the history of New Zealand where it's gone up so quickly. A lot of markets in the New Zealand market have gone up to 3 times in that period from 2002 to 2007, 2008. That's unprecedented, certainly in my lifetime. And so what people were doing in that time is they were buying property, and there was all sorts of seminars out there. You remember there was numbers of companies doing seminars, inviting people to come along and hearing how they could invest in property. Now, it was very easy to invest in property and make money because prices of property were going up so much. So if you bought 1 month, 3 months later, yes, the price of that property had gone up. You were thinking you were making money. So that encouraged more and more people to go along because everybody was making money in property. But the problem with a bull market like that, and we call that in the industry a bull market, what happens after a bull market is that you have a bear market, and things normally either go down or they flatten out. And so the last 3 years have been a flatten out period. Now, what's happened in that period of time is that people who are buying here have been holding out for as long as possible. And typically previously, when they've had a good time, after 2 or 3 years of a slump, things have started to go up again. So people have been able to retain their properties and they've been able to get through that slow period in the market. What's happened now is because it looks like we're still in for a difficult patch for another 2 or 3 years, the market has become very, very scared, and they're saying, what's going to happen? We don't know. And so typically what happens in a market where people don't know what's going to happen is they put their hands in their pockets and they wait. They don't do anything. So there's 2 groups of people out there now. There's people who are waiting and there's people who are selling because during the good time, they had properties that they bought. Now they can't afford them anymore, and so they're looking to buy. So what's going to happen over the next period of time? One will say, because is it a good time to actually buy property? Is the market going to go up? Well, you see, the market always goes up. Now, over the last 100 years in New Zealand, property's gone up around about 10% per annum, or they've doubled in value every 10 years. Now, that's been through depressions, that's been through wars, that's been through all kinds of different economic climates. But still, when you look at the averages, it's gone up around about every 10 years, it's doubled in value. That's going to happen again, even though you think it's not going to. And if you're one of those folk, then you're typical of the market at the moment. That's why people aren't buying. But if you listen to a guy called Bob Jones, who started off in property around about the same time I did, and he made truckloads of money, he always said, when everyone's out fishing, I go buying. When everyone's out buying, I go fishing. And this time, at the moment, if you ask Bob Jones, he's saying he's out buying. Why? Because he knows the market's going to respond. It's going to get better. It's not as bad as we think it is. And then he'll be in a box seat because the properties he's bought now in a down market are going to increase in value. Now, let me tell you just some of the things that will help that to happen. First of all, we're in a situation at the moment where housing is already in a major shortage. There's very little building going on, and so bit by bit, the housing stock that's required for a typical population growth in New Zealand has been going down. Christchurch's earthquake situation has added to that and made it even worse. Secondly, what's happening is immigration is down. Why is that? Because the exchange rate is so high, it's not advantageous for people in other countries to come to New Zealand with a stronger American dollar or a British pound or European euro. So people are staying where they are at the moment. But in time, when that dollar starts to come down again, people are going to make the decision to come back to New Zealand. And so then the market is going to start to get very, very busy very quickly, because not only are you going to have the economic influences which is making the market stronger here, you're also going to have the increased immigration numbers of people coming in, which will therefore increase the demand, and therefore, because the supply is not there, first of all there'll be a growth in the number of houses being built, but then eventually, because of the cost of new houses will go up because of that, then the existing houses will come back into line again and people will be buying existing stock. And finally, what's also happening is that there's a global trend now where previously in the early 60s through to the 80s, New Zealand relied strongly on the export market to Europe. And over the last 20 years, that export market has bit by bit started to go down and down, particularly when they formed the European Union. And so our product over there was no longer on the same demand because there was countries within the Union that could supply the product at a cheaper rate. So what's been happening in New Zealand is that our export market has been going down and down and down. But the exciting thing that's happening in the days that lie ahead is that China and the Asian countries are starting to, bit by bit, change their eating habits and their practicing habits. And so in those countries, not only do we have the benefit of a much cheaper transport cost, we also have a far greater population. So that in a place like China, if there's just a small percentage of change of habits in a country like China, for New Zealand that will have a substantial change in the amount of demand for our products. Likewise in the Asian countries, which are Vietnam and Thailand and India, places like those countries are changing their habits, and now you're seeing McDonald's being set up, and they're starting to eat a bit more meat. They're starting to eat a bit more meat and things like that. That's going to change the way that we export, from instead of from Europe and places like that, we're going to start in a much cheaper area to places like within the Asian belt. And so our export market is going to grow, which should mean that our economy as a whole will grow, and that will put us in a much stronger position to be able to go through the next stage of growth in the period of time. But that's going to take time. And so I don't see that the time to experience growth is the next 2 to 3 years. That's going to take longer than that. But what you do in the next 2 to 3 years is build your base. Because every property millionaire will tell you that during the difficult times they built a base, they built a foundation, and then when the market grew, that's when the value of their properties grew, and so then they had the foundation to work off the next period of time. When the markets grew, they could buy again in this period here and then experience the next growth. And that's how you build your property portfolio over a period of time. Does that make sense, Richard?
It's outstanding. Thanks, Ron.